Music against racism? What racism? We Welsh are an internationally minded people, aren't we?
The sad truth is that many areas of Wales are amongst the worst in Britain for racially motivated violence, and behind that violence, right-wing thugs. And not for the first time, the anti-racists are having to organise against them.
When British capitalism went into massive crisis in 1929, the Welsh valleys were especially hard hit. Unemployment soared and there was bitter disappointment at the failure of the Labour government to deal with the crisis. One member of the Labour cabinet, Sir Oswald Mosley, resigned and in 1931 formed the New Party. At first it attracted some support from Labour left-wingers, including a young rebel named Aneurin Bevan. I asked Professor Hywel Francis at the Miners' Library in Swansea why Mosley's New Party had attracted support from the left.
There were a small number of people. People like Aneurin Bevan, for example, were in sympathy with some of the ideas that Oswald Mosley had in relation to attacking the problems of unemployment. You have to remember at the time that you had a Labour government that was very, very weak and ineffectual, was failing on the most testing of all problems, unemployment. Mosley was somebody that looked as if he was a man of principle. On reflection, of course, he was a political maverick, had been a conservative in the 20s, now formed his own party having left the Labour Party, and then very soon afterwards forms the Fascist Party. He was a man of action, so it seemed, was reflecting on the successes of fascism on the continent.
Hitler, like Mosley, had initially sought support from the left, and when Mosley wound up the New Party and started the British Union of Fascists in 1932, he was clearly influenced by Hitler's style.
Man kann nicht dem untreu werden, was einem ganzen Leben Inhalt, Sinn.
He was a politician, he was a maverick, he was ruthless. I suppose at the end of the day, if one were to be tried to be fair to him, and I wouldn't wish to be fair to people like Mosley, the best thing you could say of him was that he was an English nationalist.
Sooner or later, in the lives of great nations, comes the moment of decision, comes the moment of destiny. And this nation again and again in the great hours of its fate has swept aside convention, has swept aside the little men of talk and of delay, and has decided to follow men and movements who say we go forward to action. And I claim that in the ranks of our black shirt legions march the mighty ghosts of England's past, and their strong arms are around us, and their voices echo down the ages, saying onward.
Although he stressed England in his speeches, Mosley's fascists, with their own military-style vehicle, began to venture into Wales. Branches were established in Cardiff, Newport, Swansea and Merthyr Tydfil. The Merthyr organiser was Arthur Isles, one of the town's many unemployed.
The only active member I remember was Arthur Isles. People, desperate people, starving. And they were looking anywhere for a solution to these problems. Arthur couldn't do it in the Labour Party, they wouldn't have him. He was expelled by the Communist Party and he wanted to make progress, I can understand that. And of course he turned to those people, see. And they grabbed him, of course, because he was a good propagandist. But the trouble with Arthur, of course, everyone knew him too well.
Keep Mosley out of Swansea. Stop Mosley before he stops your breath.
In 1934, Mosley spoke in Swansea, and his supporters booked the Brangwyn Hall so that he could return. But a well-organised local campaign ensured that permission was withdrawn.
Hitler's a great man, doesn't want war. The people are happy.
In spite of the naivety of some Welsh language papers, others in Wales were making the connection between the homegrown fascists and what was going on in Germany. The Nazis' intimidation of the Jews and of their opponents began immediately after Hitler came to power in Berlin.
When Labour councillors in Cardiff objected to the town clerk's visit to Berlin, the South Wales Echo printed anti-Semitic letters. The British Union of Fascists clearly thought that Wales would prove to be fruitful territory, and in the winter of 1935 they moved in a full-time organiser.
That organiser was an ex-professional boxer named Tommy Moran, always in the thick of it when the fists were flying. He seems to have been the man who decided that Pontypridd would be a good place to step up the fascist campaign in Wales. Then, as now, Ponty Market had plenty of immigrant stallholders, and at a time of high unemployment, the fascists thought they could easily stir up hostility against them. On a cold day in December 1936, the fascists held a meeting bang in the middle of Market Square. But their words were drowned out by the singing of the red flag. Undeterred, Mosley himself was booked to speak in Pontypridd. Rumour has it that on the night before he dined at Llanwern Hall, the home of Lady Rhondda, with the Chief Constable of Glamorgan. Mosley's venue was to be Pontypridd Town Hall. When I went back there, I found it closed up and abandoned because of asbestos pollution. By now, the fascists had their own anthem, and they were protected in the town hall by over 300 police.
And I claim that in the ranks of our black shirt legions march the mighty ghosts of England's past, and their strong arms are around us, and their voices echo down the ages.
But later that year, even the might of the Glamorgan Constabulary would not be able to save the fascists from the fury of the left.
No cowards flinch and break the steel, we'll keep the red flag flying here.
Shortly after the meeting held by Mosley in Pontypridd Town Hall, an all-in conference against fascism was held here in the Lewis Merthyr Working Men's Institute here in Porth. Severe unemployment had weakened the trade unions, and the company unions, or scab unions as many of the miners called them, were able to recruit in the Taff Merthyr colliery.
The newly elected secretary of the South Wales Miners' Federation, Communist Arthur Horner, led the fight back, making a connection between company unions and fascism.
Be ready for the call to freedom.
That call came in 1936, with a series of sit-down strikes in the South Wales coalfield, intended to reassert the power of the Fed and drive out the scab unions.
There was this degree of political sophistication, particularly amongst the miners. They had an understanding of the nature of capitalism. They saw fascism as an extreme form of capitalism, and the development of breakaway scab unions, the high levels of unemployment, police attacks on organised labour. These were all kind of proto-fascist developments in South Wales, and they were perceived in that way, and I think quite rightly so.
Eventually, the sit-down strikes brought victory. By now, the Communist Party had abandoned its previously sectarian attitude and was prepared to unite with other groups on the left in opposition to the fascists.